All right, so this is the part where we actually get to have a lot of fun because we've already looked at the infrastructure and the problem that has existed with the measurement paradigm, and we've started to come through this notion of social science. And you've started to really build that social scientific muscle by using the database that we provided in order to give you good observations and a good understanding of what's happening in your community so that you know what to track, when to track it, and why. That sentiment data and that information gives you an understanding for the tags and the categories that you need to calculate. But what's most important is that you align that sentiment with the variety of behaviors that occur in your community and inform your marketing team to measure those things. You don't need to measure all of the things, just the things that come up in your journal as being potentially important. And by doing so, you're now able to attach what you think is important, i.e. your goals and your objectives for your community, to the actual behavior of your people. Now we're going to bring it all together. I'm super, super excited. This is exactly what the entire course is named for. This is the whole reason we are building this. It's going to be the 3-dashboard approach to managing your community data firehose. Super excited about it. So here it is. Here's the template. You'll see this here. There's a link down below in the description of the video and also in the resources section. And you know what? Right here. And keep in mind, this is a short link, so it's always going to be managed and controlled by me. I'm always going to be redirecting that link to the newest possible system. So every once in a while, you may want to go pop into that link, see if there's a newer version that you might be able to use, because I'm constantly going to be iterating on this via feedback. When you implement it in your organizations and you do something cool, I'm going to be like, oh, that's a great way to do it. Let's go ahead and add that to the report. However, I do also want to be very clear about this because as we pop through each section, you'll notice that all we really have are number cards and that it's not actually reporting the thing that I'm saying needs to go there. And I'm doing that on purpose because I've built this dashboard system explicitly so that you have to build it together with your marketing team, your data flow team, and your online community. I did not want to give you a template that just reports on all of these things. And then because it reports on those things, they must be important. So you're going to frantically try to measure up to these specific areas, and then it's not going to work. Every community is its own special snowflake, but as we've learned in social science, there are specific cultural universals that are going to come up in your community. And that's why I've taught you how to fish using the data categorization process in the spreadsheet so that when we come to this template and I show you what might want to be reported, it looks more like a toolbox and a set of ideas than it does me trying to report on your community with and for you. One thing that you could do, the best thing that you could do for you and your organization is to join my online community so that we can go over this together. We can build it together and we can coiteratively create a dashboard that really works to measure your online community. The 3-dashboard approach that we have here is going to be for your executive summary, and then your community team, and then your community culture. If you remember, this outlines exactly what is in it for each individual cares about those areas. So there are 2 things that we're looking to do here. First, we're looking to say, all right, what does our stakeholder actually care about? Our executive team only really cares about the entirety health of the community. If you go back to that cell, they really only care about the results and how. Is the cell growing? How did that happen? And then the community team really says, hey, we want to put forward this precedent that helps us grow this community. And we want to know, did that build momentum? Is the community really healthy in that regard? So they care about precedent and momentum, which is the nitty-gritty actions before and after. And that frees up the 3rd dashboard, which is the most important dashboard, but also the one that your executive team cares the least about, and that is your community culture. What are the behaviors and what are the sentiments that tell you that the community is healthy? So by splitting this into 3 different dashboards, we have the ability to abstract the data in different ways, corresponding to different layers. So when you're asked to report on your community ROI, you're not reporting a whole bunch of data that your CEO doesn't care about, but you're also still collecting the community health data that you need for your community behaviors. All told, you should end up with between 15 to 20 metrics total across all three of the dashboards. Let's get started. You'll see here on this introduction page, and this basically explains how Google Data Studio works, what the structure of the dashboard really is, which we've already covered, and what it really means for other individuals. Most critically, you might want to modify this language instead of deleting it because it also informs your stakeholders on how to use the chart. You'll see that we have an information item which adds a little bit of context to the metrics. So when people ask, well, what am I looking at? You have the ability to have them hover over that, and then you can give them that data. There's also information on how to use the interface. That is going to be just as important for them as it is for you. So let's go over that. You'll see here that we have an executive summary section that includes a setup. And you'll see that your tags are going to be right here. And this is porting in, and they can actually search this tag as they'd like. But you'll also see that we have the source. So where is information coming in? This is going to be a shared system between you and marketing. So you've determined the source because you know where your community tends to exist, but so is marketing. They know where the assets tend to exist. And we're pulling all of that information into one singular drop-down box so that your success and marketing success don't fight with one another. You're not fighting for leads. You're reporting together. Same thing with the audience. You'll actually note that here the audience says all users. This is because this is pulling directly from Google Analytics, and your marketers are going to be operating that. But as you start to build and understand your scopes and you give that structure to your marketers, they're going to be able to segment all of the audiences that come in through Google Analytics here. And then you can connect the behaviors of specific segments to the sentiments of those same people in your data. That allows you to now compare what was initially apples and oranges, sentiment and behavior, into reactions and behaviors led to sentiments and why. And this is really important. Once you've set up this top row, you'll also see that there's a date range, and this date range is going to change not just this information, but any comparable metrics from the prior period. If we set it up, I can't show you now, but you'll actually see a comparable green or red metric come out that says this new account section is going up or going down from the originally registered 10 users. You'll also see that we have a goal. So every week, you and the marketing team will come together and you'll say, our goal is 5 per week of this, 70 per week of this, 7 per week of this. And now the executive team has a good understanding of how we did week over week, month over month, year over year, because they can set up, I want to see what happened week over week by selecting this month, or today, this week, or last week. And this will answer all of your executives' questions just by poking around a little bit. Once we've set that up, you'll see that the executive department is just going to say, each time the community is supposed to be helpful to the company, was it helpful? And what this does is it asks you for the department touch points. So how many new accounts were created and how many were community generated contributions? How many marketing leads came in and how many of those marketing leads were labeled as community generated? How much content was curated from the online community versus how much content was created as a result of internal business? How many support tickets came in versus how many forum issues were resolved, and how many earned media opportunities are coming through a community share of voice. These are example options, example metrics, right? But you'll see that they all largely develop into a specific revenue-based expectation. So remember, we have our atomic metrics, which is these things came in and there were certain points. And then there's the value metric. So we can now ascribe a $ to each of these individual metrics, which gives you overall the ROI per department for community versus standard. And also it gives you a wrapped up total up at the top ROI for your community in turn of total support costs saved, total community generated leads coming in, total lifetime value, and total net revenue from any given community. This is all your executive team cares about, right? Like for you, you know that this isn't the entire story. But as far as the executive team is concerned, yeah, it is. And if they do want to dive in further, well, they have 2 other slides that they can visit, right? And you do too. If they come to you to ask a question, you can defend yourself using the other 2 perspectives. Now, one thing that you will notice is there is a bar graph down at the bottom that is counting the actions and the behaviors performed by your community. If you remember, in the spreadsheet, we had this entire section for being able to turn your sentiment data into behaviors. By counting that, you can say this is how many people are signing in on a regular basis, this is how many people are visiting the knowledge base, and then this is the conversion rate of people who are visiting the knowledge base that then go to post on the forum, suggesting they have a question. And once you've set forth this amount of behaviors, it makes a lot more sense for the executive team how the community is actually impacting business. So all they want to know is results and how. All right, so now let's move into the second section. If you remember, slide please. We have 3 different sections. We covered the executive community for results and ROI, and this is the broad scope. This is the overall health of your community cell, right? But then as you get down, you really need to be able to perform the how. How are you getting stuff done? And in order to do that, you have to do this in a term of precedent. I think that this is what needs to happen for the community, and then momentum. As we're trying to build this thing into the community, how successful or not successful are we in adapting that precedent to the community's culture? And that's really all you as the team need to care about, right? So when we pop into this second section, you'll see you have the exact same setup bar. And this bar actually carries from slide to slide to slide. It's an entire report setup. So if you're looking at the executive summary and you pop over to the community team performance, it's showing you exactly the same data as what you have above. We can see that under your precedent and momentum, you have just 2 things. What this does is it says on a quarterly basis and a semi-annual basis, as in half of a year, you have set forth a specific set of goals and expectations to perform. That means anything out of that performance is not the community team's faults. And that means you can take off a few hats. You can be a little bit less overwhelmed, and you can be a little bit more focused in what you're doing. So let's say that you set a goal for increasing the likelihood that users will engage with the community instead of engaging with the support team. What specific KPIs would you like to measure for that? One is, first off, how often are they hitting the support team, right? So you're going to put a graph or a card for what's happening in your support department. And then you're going to figure out what are the behaviors and the sentiments that are causing people to ask questions in the community, and ask, can you encourage that while discouraging some of the behaviors that encourage them to ask? You'll also note that we have a button here for a full momentum report. If you wanted to, you could do an entire write-up of an entire precedent that you would like to fulfill and link it to this, but it doesn't need to be there. You don't need to do that because you have the dashboard here to say, this is the precedent we were setting and this is how it's going for now. What this allows you to do is it allows you to subtract all of the complexity from the problem at the report stage while still keeping it on those individual reports. You'll see that we're doing this twice, one for precedent 1 and one for precedent 2. And then it's not necessarily enough to say, like, that's all my team is going to do. We need to know what you've been doing on a daily basis as well. So down below, you'll see what's the team saying. And as you hover over this, you'll notice Carolyn also nailed her presentation for the consultants is exactly the same thing as what is being said in the field journal. Carolyn also nailed her presentation. You'll see that there's a highlight button here that allows you to highlight specific messages. So if you're a community manager on your own, you can actually decide what passages or what messages are most important for you on a daily basis, and they'll show up on this report. And if you want it to show up less than that, just uncheck the highlights only box and it will show everything in that report. Likewise, we have the exact same process for your public information, but the highlight button is not anywhere near as useful as your sentiment data. So your positive, negative countdown flows here. So you'll see that we have a variety of different comments that are coming through, and we have the time in which they happened. And then you'll see over here that if we click on this data, this graph here changes. And you'll notice as we go through here that we have a channel, and then we have a category, and then we have the tags, and then we have the value being awarded. That is exactly coming from this particular system here. And as it starts to scale, let me reset this real quick, you'll notice that you have the ability now to dive down deeper into each of your individual categories. And as this gets bigger, you'll start to find subcategories and subtags. This is a map of all of the sentiment data that you've been tracking over the time period being reported on the report. So people can actually look and say, hey, the lion's share of the conversation seems to be coming from our specific payment system. So something's happening with our payment system. Or, hey, there's a huge swath of collaboration opportunities on this wedge here. Maybe we should choose to focus on that in the next given month. In addition, you can also see some more basic information, some more basic community weather, which is how you've grown the community, what is that new user setup, and a net promoter score. Now, keep in mind how members become happy. There are a lot of different ways to measure this. Net promoter score is the lowest hanging fruit, but also the least efficient, the least effective. It's got a lot of problems. I actually have an entire blog about how to implement it, but also what the dangers are right here. And that allows you to move forward into the community and team performance slide. Now let's go ahead and move into our third and last slide for this particular lesson so that you have a better understanding of how to actually use this tool. Okay, community culture. This is really cool because, as I said before, we've now covered the ROI value issue. That's done now. But you have to fill that ROI and value issue based upon the individual behaviors and sentiments that you're tracking from your community. You have to do that across the community, marketing, sales, and support teams. And all of that data needs to be able to abstract and collect into your Google Analytics and your Data Studio slides in a very cohesive manner. All of that complexity has been pushed aside and it doesn't matter anymore because, like I said before, you have the larger scope, the results and how, and then you've filled the precedent and the momentum. You've taken care of that stuff. And all that's left now is the nitty-gritty details. This is less, did the people in the sand walk to a specific location, and more, who are the people and how do they feel walking into that location? This is where we start to get into the notion of being able to track people's opinions, their feelings, their thoughts, find the real value and the real quality of your online community in order to better determine online community health. So let's pop in. This is actually deceptively simple. So on the right, I'm just going to cover this because it's easiest. You'll notice that we have behaviors and sentiment data. This is basically all of the details and interfigures. You'll see highlighted comments. We've already covered that. This is basically coming from your field journal. And then we have two very simple sets. What are the top 5 kudos that happened in your community over the course of the past period that you've selected on the dash? And what are the worst 5 uh-ohs, the things that you need to fix, the things that you need to bring to people's attention? By having this qualitative data, you now have the ability to say, here's what happened this week. This is a problem. We need to fix this. Or here, this is an amazing kudos. Have at it, marketing team. Have at it, sales team. We can definitely turn this into something. The rest of the system is going to be slightly more difficult. You'll see here that we have a by the numbers situation, which is very much those behaviors. So you'll see that we have a new users, average actions per session, events per session, and views. What you really should be filling this out with is what is most relevant and prevalent in your online community to date. If you're doing a lot of blog content, it may behoove you to ask, are people talking about the blogs? Are you getting comments? Is the forum getting a lot of attention? Conversely, how long are people spending on the actual blog page before they actually speak about that? What is your watch time if you're doing YouTube videos? And how many people are attending your session, not just once, not just twice, but regularly over time? Are you noticing that that cohort is dropping or increasing? And once you've done that, you'll notice that underneath your scope targeted, this scope system will allow you to narrow all of your community culture data by the scope that you would like to look at. So your new users may have a lot more numbers than your average actions, but conversely, your veteran users may actually be really low at that, but highly active. By changing these specific numbers to allow you to change a specific scope, connect with a specific product, or create a specific event, you now have the ability to really say, what is each individual scope in my community doing? So remember, when we go back to it, what you want to do is you want to be able to measure scope by scope by scope. So when something weird happens in a specific scope and you're like, these numbers seem odd, go check the other scopes for that. And then if that's not working, go check the sentiment data for that. And because you've been doing your journal every day and you've been doing your sentiment tracking every day, you should now have the ability to go back in time way before those sessions to ask, hey, was this a thing 3 months ago, 5 months ago? And now we have a social scientific ability for prior data to matter just as much as current data does. Now, lastly, we also want to talk about your sentiment, and this is where value comes into play. Your tag and flag system, your categories that you've set up, are each supposed to have a value that is ascribed in the spreadsheet. That value can then be counted and measured. So you'll see here for transparency, we have 1 point for each time it's mentioned in the spreadsheet. If we click onto your sentiment tracker, you'll notice that nowhere in here does it actually say transparency. But you'll also notice that we have utility was stated once, consistency was stated twice, merit twice, and trust none. We have a weighted measurement system that then allows us to look at the reputation score total, and you'll notice that we have these comparison metrics that tell you if it's gone up or down over time. Again, this is based upon tags that you deem important based upon your specific setup. So let's go ahead and step back now and say, what is the process that we're really looking to build? What is it going to look like on the day-to-day? Let's hop into one last video to discuss that.